the light in her letters. In the quaint coastal town of Belshore, nestled between rolling hills and the whispering sea, lived a young man named Adrian, a quiet artist known for painting lighthouses and lonely skies. Adrian had inherited a small cottage from his grandfather, who had once been the lighthouse keeper of Belshore. The lighthouse, now decommissioned, still stood tall at the edge of the cliffs, a silent witness to time, storms, and secrets. Adrian often found inspiration by sitting beneath the lighthouse, sketching the sea or waiting for the sunset to paint the sky in colors only he seemed to notice. His life was peaceful, solitary, and content. That is, until he found the first letter. It was hidden inside a small crevice near the base of the lighthouse, wrapped in faded blue ribbon. The letter was addressed simply, "To you, the one who still listens." Intrigued, Adrian opened it and began to read. "I wonder if anyone still hears the waves the way I did. If you do, write back. I could use someone to remember with." There was no name, no date. Only the delicate handwriting and the feeling that it had been waiting there for years. Adrian, moved by something he couldn't explain, wrote a reply and tucked it into the same crevice the next day. Days passed. Then a week. And just as he thought it had been a foolish idea, a second letter appeared. That was how it began. Through countless letters, they shared pieces of themselves. She was Evelyn, once the daughter of the lighthouse keeper before his grandfather. She had lived in Belshore during her teenage years, had fallen in love under the same stars Adrian now painted, and had left the town heartbroken after a love that wasn't meant to last. She had begun leaving letters as a way to cope, to speak to the sea and the lighthouse as if they were old friends. But what Evelyn never expected was that someone would answer. Over months, their letters grew longer, more personal, filled with shared dreams, stories, and slowly, longing. Adrian began to feel like he knew her, her thoughts, her fears, the way she missed the scent of sea air and fresh bread from the village bakery. He painted her words into canvases, capturing the emotions she had buried for years. Then one day, a letter ended with this: "I'll be returning to Belshore for the first time in 15 years. I don't know what I'll find, but I hope, just maybe, I'll find you." Adrian waited by the lighthouse every evening after that. On the fifth day, as the sky turned golden lavender, a woman with auburn hair and eyes like the sea walked up the path. She looked older than the girl in the letters, but just as beautiful. She clutched a bundle of worn papers tied with blue ribbon. Adrian stood, heart pounding. "Evelyn?" She smiled. "I was hoping you'd still be listening." They talked until the stars came out, until the waves became whispers, and Belshore slept beneath its blanket of dreams. From that day on, they never needed letters again. Where the wildflowers bloom. In a quiet valley nestled between misty hills and wildflower meadows, there was a little village named Elmsworth. Life moved slowly there, marked by the rhythm of the seasons and the songs of morning birds. It was in this gentle place that Evelyn Hart, a young woman with a heart full of dreams and sketchbooks full of wildflowers, lived with her grandmother in a quaint stone cottage. Evelyn spent most of her days painting and tending to her garden, occasionally selling her art in the village square. Her work was known for capturing emotions, particularly love, even though she had never experienced it herself. That was, until the summer Tristan Bell arrived. Tristan, a quiet and reserved writer from the city, came to Elmsworth seeking solitude to finish his novel. He rented a cabin on the edge of the village, near the path that led through the forest and into Evelyn's favorite meadow. Their first meeting was brief. She had dropped a jar of paint near the stream, and he had silently helped her pick it up. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, curiosity, perhaps, or the beginning of something far more tender. Over the weeks, they kept running into each other, at the market, by the river, near the ancient oak that stood like a sentinel in the meadow. Their conversations grew longer, their silences more comfortable. Evelyn showed him how to gather wildflowers read her chapters from his novel Beneath the Willow Tree. She painted while he wrote. They didn't say the word love, not yet. But it hung in the air like the fragrance of lilacs after rain. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of golden blush, Tristan brought her to the meadow where they first met. There, among the blooming cosmos and buttercups, he handed her a small journal. Inside were his handwritten words, not part of his novel, but pieces of his heart. Letters he had written but never sent. Confessions of how he had come to Elmsworth to run away from noise but found the quiet of her soul instead. Evelyn, eyes shimmering, replied the only way she knew how, by taking his hand and pressing a delicate blue cornflower into his palm, the same one she had drawn the day after they met. Seasons changed. Leaves turned, snow fell, flowers bloomed again. But Evelyn and Tristan remained, two hearts rooted in the same soil, nourished by the same sun, blooming side by side. Years later, travelers who passed through Elmsworth often found themselves enchanted by a small art gallery at the edge of town. Inside were paintings of meadows and wild skies, and on a shelf, beside a vase of fresh wildflowers, sat a book titled Where the Wildflowers Bloom by Tristan Bell, dedicated simply to Evelyn, my muse, my meadow, my home. Until the last autumn leaf. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and golden meadows, there lived a girl named Alara who worked as a florist in a small shop her grandmother once owned. Every morning, she opened the wooden shutters, arranged fresh daisies and lavender on the windowsill, and waited for the world to pass by. She believed in love, but only the kind found in books, soft, patient, and quiet. One October morning, when the air carried the scent of leaves and rain, a young man named Adrian arrived in the village. He was a writer, retreating from the noise of the city to finish his long-overdue novel. With a leather bag slung over his shoulder and a typewriter tucked under his arm, he rented the attic room above the bakery next to Alara's flower shop. The first time they met, it was raining. Adrian was caught without an umbrella and ducked into the flower shop for shelter. Alara, slightly startled by the stranger, offered him a towel and a cup of chamomile tea. Their eyes met, and something unspoken lingered in the air. Days turned into weeks. Adrian would pass by Alara's shop every morning, pretending to browse the flowers just to catch a glimpse of her smile. Alara began leaving small notes tucked between the petals of the bouquets he bought, quotes about love, dreams, and hope. One day, he found a note that read, "Do you believe two strangers can become home to each other?" He looked up and saw her watching him from behind the counter. "Yes," he whispered. "I think they already have." They spent the autumn together walking under rust-colored trees, sharing stories over coffee, and dancing barefoot in the kitchen to old jazz songs. Adrian read her the chapters of his novel, and Alara pressed wildflowers between the pages. But as winter approached, Adrian received a call from his publisher. His book was accepted, and he had to return to the city. The night before he left, they sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the last leaves fall. "I'm afraid," Alara said softly, "that you'll forget the girl who speaks with flowers." Adrian took her hand and placed something in her palm, a golden locket. Inside was a pressed daisy and a tiny scroll of paper that read, "My story ends where yours begins." "I'll come back," he promised. "Every autumn, until the last leaf falls." Years passed. Adrian kept his promise. Each October, he returned, sometimes for a week, sometimes just a day, but always for her. Letters filled the distance between visits, and love bloomed like wildflowers between pages of time. When they were old and gray, they still sat on that porch, wrapped in the same blanket, watching leaves fall together. The village called them the Autumn Lovers, and their story was passed on like folklore. In the end, it was not the grand gestures or passionate declarations that defined their love. It was the quiet moments, the whispered words, and the promise that no matter how far one wandered, love would always lead them home.